Welcome, everybody, to this week's podcast episode for the Financial Freedom Podcast. And I'm your host, Dr. Christopher. And as we talk about the four different types of freedom: time, financial, location, health freedom. And in that light, I'm always scouring the globe, interviewing entrepreneurs, creators, influencers on the cutting edge and impacting the world. So today we have a fellow Texan, Zack from Austin, and he's a consciousness mentor to world-class leaders and founders. And he specializes in simplifying complex consciousness teachings to make it very easy for a person to identify their ego and its limitations. So today's going to be talking all about unleashing your potential, manifesting, and I'm happy to welcome Zack to the show. Welcome.
It's my honor, Christopher. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I know we had chatted a little bit backstage and we connected through Podmatch. And so tell us more about yourself and how you got started. We'll go from there.
Yeah. So for myself, I've been coaching leaders and founders for about 3 years now. I've been in the coaching space for just over 10. And I've been in corporate America for a short time in the management roles. I was very much attracted to the personal development side of things, but I was craving my own style of freedom. So going out on my own, becoming an entrepreneur. And when I first went out, I was doing a lot of fitness. We were talking about health freedom. So I was very much in the health and fitness space, moved into bodybuilding coaching as well, which is a little bit different. But as I was going through this coaching time period, I started to experience an awakening or a calling inside of myself, something that I knew was deeper. And I knew this because it was quite frightening what it was asking me to do. And ultimately, what is it asking me? It's my higher self or my soul that's really calling for me to make an impact, a greater impact. And I knew that I could do that inside of business leaders and founders as they are truly creating in the world. And that's what we're here to do. We are creators. And sometimes it's very hard to believe that because we have been raised. I like to say that victims have been raising victims for generations. So through all this environmental influence, through our own way of being, through our ego, which is something that you spoke about, we are here to overcome victim consciousness. And once we can do this, we can truly realize and know in our heart, in our being, that we are the creator and the cause of everything in our life. Something drastic starts to switch inside of people, and this perception shift really starts to accelerate results in their life and then the success and the fulfillment that they're after.
Yeah. Yeah. Very. And I was talking to a couple of fellow entrepreneurs, and they're just talking about how society is just programmed mostly through propaganda, mass media to basically fail. And so we'll get into it. What is victim consciousness? What is that?
So victim consciousness in the very simplest form would say that it's not my fault and everything is happening to me. So there's a lack of responsibility, and also there's a lack of meaning in their life. You're just here by chance. And everything else that's happening to you is not anything that you're creating. It's what everybody else is doing to you. Now, the depth of this can get very deep in the understanding of it, because if I were to give you another distinction, it's anytime you think that you aren't infinitely powerful. Now we can start looking at the ego and seeing, where is that taking away from my power, my belief in myself? If a marker, and this is when I'm guiding the clients that I guide, we say that, look, clarity and self-belief to us are the number one and number two, or 1A, characteristics needed for success and rapid success. So if you're clear, but then you don't believe that you can create what you're clear about, you're going to sabotage yourself. If you have belief, but you have no idea what you want to create, you're going to sabotage yourself. You have no direction. It doesn't matter. So these two go hand in hand. So if you're not in 100% belief that you can create the thing that you want to create, and let's say you're 99%, that means 1% of you is in victim consciousness. That means that you doubt yourself, or you feel as if you are unworthy or incapable. These are those deep levels of illusion that's created by the ego mind. And when we succumb to this, and we succumb to believing what our mind, our ego mind, is telling us, then we become incarcerated by our mind. And ultimately, the first level of freedom is to realize that you are not the mind, that you are not your thoughts, that you are the observer of such. And through that process, you, with your own free will, can choose how you want to think, how you want to feel, and how you want to act.
Interesting. And you talk about this, I really love this idea of consciousness because you meet people at different points. Sometimes you don't see them for 19 years and they're like totally different. How do you reveal the depth of victim consciousness within you? Or how do you find out like if you're a victim or?
Yeah. So the way that I like to say it for a very easy way to know is that your mind and your body they have a relationship with each other and they work hand in hand. So if I were to come and punch you in the gut, your mind would register that, ow, that hurt, right? But that's not as frequent as the mind saying very negative things to yourself and then the body saying, ow. Because when we are in a negative space, we're in a victim space, our body will let us know what's true and what's not true. So if I'm telling myself I'm not worthy or I'm not good enough or I'm a bad person or at the level that I actually work with a lot of people, normally they have a high level of success, but there's no fulfillment and they feel like they're lacking the actual purpose in their life. I don't have a purpose. That doesn't feel good in the body. Your gut will be uncomfortable. You won't feel good.
Mm-hmm.
So that is a very easy sign. Once you become aware, I'm not, my body doesn't feel good. What am I thinking about that's creating this response in my body? Because it's my belief, and this is just my belief here, that the body is actually the physical expression of the soul. And the mind is something that's completely different. It is the thing that's connected to what we could say universal consciousness or unity consciousness, what this is. And through that, it's a wave of energy and the collective. So I can be picking up on somebody else's thoughts. Empaths do this all the time. They can pick up on somebody else's emotions, somebody else's thoughts, and not even know whether that thought is mine or is theirs or whatever else. But when you know yourself and the way that you want to think you're choosing, you become very clear about what that is.
Mm-hmm. So
that's just, I know we don't have a lot of time, so I'm just trying to give them kind of a cue in. Hey, pay attention to how your body feels with what you're telling yourself, and you'll find the areas to go into victim. Now, I can give you a couple of different things that most people don't think about. For instance, there are no accidents at all. Everything is purposely done. So if there are no accidents, that means there's no luck. So how many times does somebody say, oh, I got lucky? You're taking away your power when you said that you got lucky. Or maybe you're looking at somebody else's success and says, man, it must be nice with them. They're really lucky. No, they're not lucky. They chose a certain amount of choices that led them to a point that they've acquired or attained whatever it is that they have in their life. And this gets really deep and go even further because then some people are like, what about people that like get inheritance and stuff like that? We can go down that rabbit hole. It's going to be too long. But inside of that, we have to start understanding that every single time that we say that somebody has something that we don't, we're saying that we were a victim of that circumstance.
Oh, wow. That's very deep and like it's almost like whenever you feel yourself envious or you have FOMO, that's quite like cues that you were talking about.
Yeah.
So one is, so you talked about cues and especially we talk about ego and how can somebody quickly identify if it's their ego or if it's their higher self in their thought processes?
Yeah. So I like to say there are three main characteristics of the ego. The first one is identification. It is the part of your mind that is trying to identify things and then also identifying yourself. Right. The next thing is that it is of separation. So now if I'm identifying myself and then I see myself as separate from other people, other beings, so to speak. And then also it separates your mind. Because you can have, inside of us, we seem to have a dueling battle between love and inspiration and fear and control, even in our own mind. If we didn't have the fear and control aspect of it, there would be no division. That's the thing that's creating the separation away from this love and inspiration and courage that you can experience. And then the third thing is fear. And I like to say that the ego's weapon is fear. And there are a lot of children of fear. Inadequacy, fear of being unworthy. There's fear of failure. All these different things are just different children that blossom from a fear, but ultimately the children are stories that we tell ourselves, they're beliefs that we tell ourselves, and then there's a subsequent behavior that we create from those belief systems. But the majority of our belief systems as human beings was built from fear because our parents were afraid for us as we're growing up, for our safety, right? When we're children, we come into the world as perfect, man. Our eyes have so much wonderment in it, and we're just here to explore until we're told, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And then our belief system starts getting built from what other people's fears are, and then that's what we go forward. So most of the programs that people are running on, when I say the program, it's the subconscious program, is built by fear. Yeah. So when we awaken to this understanding, we start to understand that, hey, there's no invisible force working against me. the invisible force is visibly me, then we can start taking responsibility for the choices that we're making. And that is the only way that we start to shift. The law of cause and effect tells us this. You are the cause through your choices. There's an effect in your life. And what I like to tell people is, look, I don't care what you believe. All I want to know is what you believe. Does it have an effect if you experience happiness, joy, and abundance? And if it doesn't, well, why would you believe it? So it's just about creating very sharp distinctions in people's minds that awakens them to a different perception, a different way of being. And it's not my perception. It's the perception that serves you.
Yeah. And as we talk about these thoughts and then perceptions, beliefs and values, some of this is tied to emotional trauma. And how do you some strategies to quickly shift your subconscious and also steps to healing?
Yeah, so I would go with the steps to healing first, because you really have to go and do the inner work, self-discovery, self-exploration, becoming aware of things. So with that, I say that there's three basically basic steps of healing. And the first step is acceptance. And normally that's the step that people resist for decades. They'll continue to experience the thoughts of not being good enough. They'll continue to experience the thoughts they don't want to think based off past experiences that they've had, traumatic experiences. They'll continue to act like it didn't happen. For myself, I was addicted to pornography for 16 years, and it took me 16 years for me to admit I had a problem, even though inside of me, I knew I did. But I couldn't admit it. So that's acceptance, right? So once we move through the resistance, which is created by all sorts of fears, fear of loss, fear of being not good enough, all these different fears are what create the resistance. Then acceptance allows us to start looking at it. Okay, now I can look at it. So now we move into understanding. I need to understand why this kind of happened to me. And also, how did this benefit me? How does this serve me in this moment? Because all regret is a lesson that has not been recognized. Because we like to say, I shoulda, woulda, coulda, did something different. And I'm saying that, no, you shoulda, woulda, coulda, did what you did because it's what you did. And until you accept what you did, you can't actually see what the lesson from that experience is. So that when that experience comes back, as it comes back in pattern, you then make a different choice. That isn't the regretful choice, it's a new choice. You shouldn't get the opportunity again. But in the understanding, really we're trying to extract what is the lesson that's serving you and benefiting you in the present moment. And then lastly, that's like the masculine form of healing, the why understanding. And then the last one is forgiveness. We got to go into the feminine. Now I need to start forgiving myself, because that logic always ends in a stalemate. If so, science would have found the key to everything, but they can't, because logic only brings us to a stalemate. So once we can say why so many times, and there's what's the answer? If I'm not satisfied with this answer, but this is it, the only logical thing to do is to start forgiving myself for what I did. And then that's the releasing in the Buddhist sense. That's the releasing of karma. That forgiveness is the releasing of karma. And this is the releasing of the energy that's associated with that trauma. So when we move through these things, then after doing this healing, because if we don't do that part, we're bypassing. We're just resisting. We're just avoiding. We're saying, I'll deal with it later. You'll deal with it now, or you're going to just continue to deal with it later. It's still there. Once we get to that point, then it's about being very repetitive with forgiveness, very repetitive with the lesson. Because your mind works like my mind. It works like anybody else's mind. Think about this. If you ever told somebody sometime in your life that you were going to do something, and then this person responded back with, I'll believe it when I see it, some sort of form of that, your mind does the same thing to you. Oh, you forgive yourself for this traumatic experience once. I don't know if you really forgive yourself, so I'll believe it when I see it. And then it brings the experience back forward again. And then you forgive yourself again. It's okay, maybe you are going to forgive yourself, but you know what? I'm going to try again. Here's the experience again. And then you forgive yourself again. And your mind's, oh, maybe you're serious about it. The problem is that people will forgive themselves one and think that's all they need to do. But then the experience comes back up and they get frustrated. I already forgave myself for this. Why is this happening to me? Gotcha. You didn't forgive yourself. That's not what forgiveness is. So the subconscious mind is reprogrammed through doing things repetitively in the present moment over and over, because that's how it's programmed. So for me personally, if I watched porn for 16 years of my life, which ultimately probably was 10,000 or more times that I watched porn while I was doing this, why would I think that I could heal from the regret and the shame and the sadness of that by just forgiving myself once? I had to forgive myself multiple times. And then over time, the emotional intensity of the thoughts that's associated with the trauma started to lessen. And then now I still experience, oh, maybe you're going to watch porn. And it's just a thought that passes in my mind. There's no emotional attachment to it, right?
Mhm.
Because it's still a part of me. Most people say, oh, that was the old me. The moment you say this is the old you is the moment that the old you starts becoming the new you, because you're putting something to the side that you say isn't a part of you anymore, but it is. And if you don't keep yourself aware of both parts, your dark and your light, then your dark will start to create the self-sabotage and the old pattern behaviors because your lack of awareness that you are both simultaneously. And that's what actually creates wholeness.
That's really interesting. He's almost like Zen. But one thing that was really interesting was you said when the forgiveness releases the karma, which is really interesting because, karma is this intention, like it's like a cycle effect. But then, this forgiveness kind of releases that pent up energy that, which is very fascinating. I've always been fascinating with karma and dharma and all these concepts. Yeah. I know one thing is we're coming to the end of this, but one thing is, what are some simple takeaway, highly effective strategies to make a huge impact on daily performance and personal well-being?
Yeah, being aware of setting intention. I can't remember who said this, but they said every intentional act is a magical act, and that is very true. So when I'm working with my clients, we call it consciousness self-mastery. What does that equal? It equals greater performance. It equals greater happiness. It equals greater feeling of abundance. That's what this equals. So I don't call myself a performance coach because this is everything to me. And the reason why I say that is that if you want to increase your performance, set an intention prior to everything that is important to you to do. Before this call, and we were together, I set an intention. My intention is to show up like X, Y, and Z. Just by bringing my intention into my conscious awareness, now I have a guide of how I want to be on the call with you. My intention was to show up in love, courage, and transparency. And that's what I've been here for. When I have clients, for instance, that, hey, I'm about to do a big presentation. Cool. Set an intention prior to that. And then also the second thing that's very valuable is visualizing the experience and how you want to show up in the experience. Because our subconscious mind doesn't know the difference between what we visualize and what we experience in real life. If I have, for instance, a client in that same way that's saying, oh, I'm going to have a big presentation today, I'll say, okay, that morning, I want you to visualize the room. I want you to visualize the people that you know are going to be in the room. I want you to actually see if you can smell it. If you've been in that room before, what does it smell like? What does it feel like to be there? And then I want to visualize yourself just crushing your presentation the entire time. Your practice, your mind doesn't know you're practicing. Or your mind doesn't know the difference whether it's in person or not. So you're actually practicing while you're sitting in your seat. And then you come to the moment and you're not as nervous because you've already practiced it, right? You already know what you're going to say. You've already seen this happen. So this is manifestation, as you talked about in the beginning of it. You're manifesting the reality that you want to have just by associating the thought and the visualization of what you want it to be. Ultimately, it's my belief that we create just like the creator or God created this universe. You can think about this universe as a thought of God, right? A mental projection of God, boom, universe. How do we create? From mental projections in our mind, and then we create the reality that we want to live in as well. So we are co-creators in this way. So if we can align ourselves in understanding how important intention and visualization is, you can see huge improvements in performance, huge improvements in decreasing stress and anxiety, and really finding the fulfillment and the happiness, because that's what's blocking us from such, is the fear, is anxiety, is the worry, is the stress. And then what are we doing? All we're doing is creating a frequency of attracting more worry, anxiety, stress, and fear. We have to take responsibility for our thoughts and what we want to create in this world.
Yeah. A lot of deep and really golden gems. Hope the audience listening out there really take some really concepts. These are how you heal and manifest and, attract. So how can people, I know a lot of people listening are interested in following you, contacting you, working with you. How can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find me on any of my social media outlets at Zack Blakeney. Nobody has my name, so it's pretty easy to find. YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, the whole nine. For my website, it's www.unleashyourg.com/today. And the Unleash Your G is Unleash Your Genius, which is your creative genius inside you. And yeah, that's the main places you can find me.
And with that, he's a self-mastery consciousness coach. He's the founder of the Conscious Creators Community and empowering conscious entrepreneurs really to not just succeed, but really to fulfill themselves and to give back. So thanks so much. I really loved the conversation, and thanks for all the info and wisdom you gave.
Absolutely, Christopher. It's my honor. Thank you.